Hey, Mr. Henderson, how you doing? You got a minute? And he'd say, hey, Jody, come on. And he knows me, so it's okay. And we'd sit down, and I'd ask him my usual 2 questions. So, how are you feeling about the 2 candidates? And secondly, are you planning to vote?
How often would you ask those questions?
About once a month, over a series of months, and I'd ask 10 or so people the same questions.
Did you notice any trends in their answers?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay. May I be heard?
Sure.
Now, Ms. Sandberg just told us that she was asking citizens of Truman what they felt about candidates. Insofar as she is offering what those people were telling her in these interviews for the truth of the matter asserted and determining those trends, this is inadmissible hearsay testimony, and I'd move to strike, I'm sorry, Your Honor, and I'd just object before she gets into that testimony on the record.
Counsel.
Your Honor, if I may make an offer of proof, the witness actually isn't going to testify to any statements, or I can ask the witness to refrain from testifying to statements where people individually say, I am supporting Ms. Ginger or I am supporting Ms. Heisman. Rather, what we expect the witness will say is that the people said that they plan to vote for Ms. Ginger or that they plan to vote for Mayor Heisman. In that instance, it qualifies under an exception to hearsay, 803.3. In this jurisdiction, what that says is that a statement that goes to an individual's intent or plan qualifies as an exception to hearsay. That's exactly what this statement is.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah.
I believe Mr. Zhu's question was, what were the trends you were noticing given those conversations with voters? For her to speak about trends, she would have to be relying on those statements to show the truth of the matter asserted, not just to show the voters' intent.
Your Honor, I can narrow down the question if you'd like.
Look, Mr. Zhu, she's obviously a political reporter. She knows what the word trends means, so if you can lay a foundation and get it out, more power to you.
Yes, Your Honor. When you spoke to those people in January and February, and you asked that question, that second question, whether or not they were planning on voting, what typical answers did you get?
Typical answer in January and February was absolutely planning to vote.
What about in March?
March, not so much. A lot of people saying, I'm not planning on voting anymore.
Well, I want to talk about why that might be the case. Well, first of all, did they ever say that they weren't planning on voting because they thought they weren't qualified?
I thought you were going to elicit specific statements.
Oh, Your Honor, we're actually not eliciting specific statements. If I may make an offer of proof, the witness is going to say that nobody
No,
ever said that.
you understood what I said. Back up, take another shot at it, and see what you can do. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Why don't we just move on from those statements and talk about why that might be the case? Did you notice any changes in campaign strategy between January, February, and March?
Oh yeah, big changes.
Like what?
Well, let's start with the fact that Ginger had all this support in Bellevue because it was her home district. And then in the beginning of March, she just up and left. I was thinking, Miss Ginger, where are you going? What are you doing? Come back.
Objection to relevance, Your Honor. May I be heard? Your Honor, Ms. Sandberg is offering her opinion of Ms. Ginger's campaign strategy. That makes no fact in the case of Max Heisman's election fraud more or less probable. Move to strike her opinion of Ms. Ginger's campaign strategy.
Your Honor, she's not giving her opinion. What she's saying is what happened. She was just testifying that Ms. Ginger left Bellevue and started, if I may make an offer of proof, she's about to say that she started campaigning in the other 11 districts. That certainly is relevant because one of the claims in today's case is what caused Ms. Ginger to lose the election. And if it wasn't fraud, it's relevant.
Counsel?
Your Honor, I believe the witness was being non-responsive. The question was, what did you observe of the campaign strategies? And she told us that she was wondering why Ms. Ginger did one thing or another. Your Honor, her opinion of what Ms. Ginger was doing doesn't make any fact in the case more or less probable.
Last shot.
Your Honor, all she said was that she had all this, Ms. Ginger had all of this
I know
support.
what she said, Counsel. The question you asked her was whether or not she noticed a change in strategy. She can answer that question, and if she's got a foundation for it, she can, but she's not going to give in her opinion about what was going on.
Of
Move
course.
to strike her opinion, Your Honor.
Yeah, jury will disregard the witness's portion regarding the last part of the answer.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Sandberg, without talking about how you feel about what Ms. Ginger did, can you just tell her what did she do?
She went to the other 11 districts. She was spreading herself real thin, and in the meantime, Mayor Heisman swooped into District 12, started campaigning real hard there.
Whoa, there's objection on the table. Once the lawyer stands up to object, please stop answering the question, okay? Fine. Counsel, go.
Objection once again on 2 grounds, Your Honor. First, non-responsive, and second, relevance. Your Honor, first she told us that Ms.
Time out. Before you go any further.
Certainly, Judge.
Non-responsive, could counsel let you rephrase the question and work back into it, all right?
Yes, Your Honor.
So the non-responsive part is stricken. All right, give it another shot.
So based on what you observed, What did Ms. Ginger do in March?
She started campaigning in the other 11 districts, not in Bellevue.
What about Mayor Heisman?
Well, she went straight to Bellevue, started campaigning real hard there.
Did you hear of any, what do you mean when you said that she started campaigning real hard?
Oh, she was holding rallies, doing speeches, kissing babies, shaking hands. You know how that gets folks fired up.
Did you hear of any rallies or events that Ms. Ginger held in Bellevue?
Objection calls for hearsay.
No, I don't think it does. Go ahead. Answer the question, ma'am.
Do you know of any rallies or events that Ms. Ginger held in Bellevue in the 2 weeks before Election Day?
I know of one. I was held at a tiny gym I'd never heard of.
How many people were there? Did you attend?
A few.
Whoa, back up, man. Foundation, did you attend?
Yes,
Okay, go ahead, answer the question.
How many people were there, Ms. Sandberg?
a few, not too many.
So based on your observations, was there anything else that Ms. Ginger did that might have hurt her support in Bellevue?
Objection, Your Honor. It calls for speculation. May I be heard, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, for Mr. Zhu to ask this witness, Ms. Sandberg, a reporter, what Ms. Ginger may have done that would have hurt her support requires that she speculate as to the mindset of all of the voters in Bellevue. We, Your Honor, object to that opinion offered by this reporter as she's not talking about things that she observed. Counsel is specifically asking her what Ms. Ginger was doing that would have hurt her support. It requires speculation to be answered.
If I may be heard, Your Honor. She's just giving an opinion that's rationally based on her perception. Certainly she's a journalist. She testified that she canvassed in the neighborhood. She can tell whether or not people are excited or not, even if she's not getting
journalists have rational perceptions?
Yes.
Go on, keep going.
Thank you.
No, with your...
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not there yet, keep going.
My argument was simply that Ms. Sandberg can give an opinion that's rationally based on her perception. She can say whether or not a certain event likely would have hurt Ms. Ginger's support or helped it, especially if it's something like a gaffe, which is what we expect she'll testify about.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah.
Ms. Sandberg's opinions as to what would or would not hurt Ms. Ginger's support is speculative. He can ask her what Ms. Ginger was doing and what she observed with voters, but for him to suggest that what Ms. Ginger did in fact hurt her support requires this witness to speculate as to the mindset of the voters and how they were perceiving the course of the campaign.
Your Honor, I'm not asking her to give any definite opinion as to whether or not it hurt Ms. Ginger's support. All I'm asking her is if there were any events or any actions that Ms. Ginger took that might have been perceived poorly, and surely she can give that lay opinion.
No, I don't think she can, because you're asking her perception, but, and there's no support for the conclusion she's trying to tell this jury. But you can ask her more questions that are fact-specific about things she saw or did or reported.
Of course, Your Honor. So, Ms. Sandberg, was there anything else that Ms. Ginger did during that month of March that stood out to you? Excuse me.
Yes. There was a fundraiser with some corporate sponsors and big donors, and Mayor Heisman and Miss Ginger were both there. And Miss Ginger got some sort of lob question about big business. And in the middle of her answer, she just kind of goes rogue, starts talking about how poor people are taken from the system.
Objection. I'm sorry, Your Honor.
We've got an objection, so stop. Yeah,
I apologize, Your Honor, but I'm going to have to object to a lack of foundation. Specifically, Your Honor, Ms. Sandberg is attributing statements to Ms. Ginger that I don't believe she can. Your Honor, specifically, this witness heard these statements in an audio recording, and I have a good faith belief that this witness herself knows that that audio recording is a fake. Your Honor, if given permission to voir dire this witness, I believe I can show that Ms. Ginger never made these statements in the first place. And for counsel and Ms. Sandberg to offer these as Ms. Ginger's statements, there's not a proper foundation for them to do that.
If I may be heard, Your Honor. First of all, we certainly don't think that this witness knows that that statement was a fake. Secondly, if you look at a piece of case law, if I may direct your attention to it, it's on page 3. It has to do with authentication. It's called Filto v. Wanek. I apologize if I'm pronouncing those names incorrectly, Your Honor. But what it says...
better than I could.
What it says, Your Honor, is that a statement's admissibility will sometimes turn on the identity of the person making the statements. As long as the proponent of the statement produces evidence that would permit a reasonable jury to find, by a preponderance of the evidence, that a given person made a particular statement, the court must assume, for the purposes of assessing the statement's admissibility, that the statement was made by that person. In this case, Ms. Sandberg can identify the voice in the audio recording as Ms. Ginger's. Furthermore, I don't expect that opposing counsel will be able to prove that this witness knows that that statement was a fake. At best, he can argue that it was reported by some news reporter that it might have been a fake, but she can't confirm or deny that.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah.
If counsel is going to attribute specific statements to Elizabeth Ginger, as I believe they intend to do, and they've done since their opening statement, talking about a statement related to leeches, they have to show that she did make that statement. Your Honor, Ms. Sandberg herself could never authenticate that statement. In fact, it was reported that that statement was a fake. Insofar as there's no foundation to show that these statements were actually the statements of Miss Elizabeth Ginger, I continue to object, and Your Honor, I'd ask for permission to voir dire the witness to point out that she doesn't have the ability to authenticate those remarks.
Well, no, that's not necessary. I'm going to ask counsel to establish foundation. The way the question was asked, counsel, it made it sound like this lady was at the press conference or at the meeting or the fundraiser, whatever it was. So establish a foundation. Let's take it a step at a time and see if it comes in or not. Ma'am, stop editorializing, please. Answer the questions. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Are you familiar with an audio recording that was released with Ms. Ginger's voice?
Yes. It was leaked to the major news networks in Truman. I heard it on the TV.
Who did it sound like to you?
Elizabeth Ginger.
Was it ever confirmed that that was a fake, the audio recording?
No. It was reported at least, but I never verified that, no.
What did the audio recording say?
Said something along the lines of, poor people are taken from the system like leeches.
Objection, once again, Your Honor, lack of foundation. Ms. Sandberg just told us that she couldn't verify whether or not that statement was a fake. And Your Honor, if indeed it was a fake, as we have a good faith belief that it was, then they can't attribute these statements to Ms. Ginger.
Well, I'm not sure the jury will. They heard what she said. You can cross-examine. Continue, counsel.
Certainly, Judge.
What was in the audio recording?
It was a tape of Miss Ginger saying that poor people were taken from the system like leeches.
Time out, ma'am. It's a tape from somebody purporting to be Miss Ginger, correct?
Yes.
All right, continue, counsel.
Can you repeat just one more time what was said in the audio recording?
The voice said, poor people are taken from the system like leeches.
When it was broadcasted on the news radio, like you just mentioned, did they say anything about who made that statement?
I recognized the voice to be Miss Ginger, and it was reported that it was Miss Ginger's voice.
Objection, hearsay.
May be heard.
No, overruled. Go on.
That recording that you just mentioned, was it played in Bellevue?
Yes, it was broadcast everywhere that the news networks broadcast.
Thank you, Ms. Sandberg. Nothing further.
Thank you. Counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Before I proceed with cross, permission to set up the courtroom for demonstrative?
Sure. Opposing counsel seen?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Have you guys seen this?
Yes, Your Honor, we have.
You okay with it?
Yes, Your Honor, though I do ask permission to move so that I may see the
Yeah,
demonstrative.
of course. I just want to make sure you've seen it. Yes, counsel.
Can we just inquire quickly to Mr. Warhead how much time the plaintiffs have remaining for, the defense has remaining for the direct?
8 minutes and 50 seconds.
Thank you very much.
You can just go in the back of the hour.
Yes, Your Honor.
Might as well.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Of course.
Ms. Sandberg, like any good reporter, you know that it's important to follow your evidence until it all ties back together, right?
Well, sure.
Ma'am, you spent the last few months covering the election next door in Truman, right?
Oh, that's right.
You
Yes.
spent almost all of your time in Bellevue. That's in District 12 of Truman, right?
I spent a lot of time in a lot of districts, but mostly Bellevue in March. Yep.
Now, ma'am, I want to talk to you a little bit about something that Mr. Zhu didn't bring up on your direct examination, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Ma'am, you received a strategy memorandum purporting to be from the Heisman campaign while you were reporting on the election, right?
I got an anonymous tip that was left at my doorstep. It had that memo in it.
Ma'am, plaintiff's 4, that strategy memorandum, it should be on the table right in front of you. Do you see it?
Oh, I found it.
That's that same document, right?
Yes.
Ma'am, you were given that document while you were covering the race, right?
That's right.
So, naturally, you called the Heisman campaign to ask them if that statement was their campaign strategy, right?
Yes.
You asked them whether they were actually considering suppressing votes.
I asked him if anything in the memo was true,
Now, the first time you called them, they said, the memo, it's not real, right?
That's right.
The second time, you got passed all the way up to the campaign manager, right?
That's true. I spoke with Tom Lyon.
And Tom Lyon, he didn't just say it wasn't real, ma'am, he threatened you.
He just said that it wasn't real.
He threatened to sue you if you tried to publish that memorandum.
Well, sure, I didn't know if it was real or not.
He said, if you try to publish that memo, I'll sue you for libel, Ms. Sandberg, right?
That's what he said.
It was clear to you that the campaign, they didn't want that memo to see the light of day.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Your Honor, I believe that this is rationally based on the witness's perception. She was threatened when she talked about publishing a memo. She can tell us that they didn't want it published.
If I may be heard, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Just like her opinion isn't relevant on direct examination about Ms. Ginger's actions, her opinion about what the campaign may have wanted or not wanted certainly isn't relevant here.
Counsel, you can ask her questions that may go to her perception of what was going on, but not as to what was being perceived by the campaign itself.
Certainly. Ma'am, the campaign, specifically, they told you that they did not want that memorandum published, right?
That's right.
Well, let's talk about what that memorandum said, ma'am. You'll agree with me that that campaign strategy memo,
Can you see that okay, ma'am?
Not quite.
can you see it now, Ms. Sandberg?
Yes.
Members of the jury? Ms. Sandberg, that strategy memo, it said that the strategy would be to persuade people not to vote, right?
Yes, that's right. That's what it said.
It said that the strategy would be to reduce the votes of low education, low income voters in District 12, right?
That's correct.
Ma'am, this is the same memo that the campaign manager told you he didn't want to see published, right?
That's right.
So, ma'am, naturally you wanted to figure out whether the campaign would actually try to pursue a strategy like that, right?
Well, sure.
So you went to the polling places on election day,
Oh, yeah. I went there. I was in Bellevue.
and you heard voters in line in District 12 asking questions, didn't you, ma'am?
I heard them talking amongst themselves. Sure.
You heard them asking questions about the requirements for voting, right?
Yep. They were talking about voter requirements.
They sounded concerned about whether or not they could vote.
I don't know if they sounded concerned. I remember them talking about voter requirements.
Ma'am, you recall making an affidavit prior to today's case, right?
Sure.
Ma'am, those voters were concerned when you heard them talking in line at District 12.
Yeah. They were frowning and such.
But to be clear, ma'am, you hadn't heard those concerns about voting requirements in District 1 earlier that morning, right?
I don't recall that.
You hadn't heard them in District 2.
No.
Ma'am, you hadn't heard those concerns about voting requirements in any district in the city except District 12.
I only really spent time at the polling place in District 12, so I couldn't tell you much about the other districts.
That's the only place where you heard concerns about voting requirements, right?
That's right.
So naturally, you went up to those voters to ask them why they were worried, right?
Oh, sure.
But, ma'am, when you tried to ask them why they were concerned, a man stopped you, didn't he?
Yeah, there are rules about talking to people in line to vote. I wasn't allowed to do that.
A man came up to you and he said, stop asking those voters questions, right?
That's right.
Ma'am, that was this man, the man depicted in Plaintiff's Exhibit 3, right?
Yes, looks like him.
He didn't just tell you to stop asking voters questions, he threatened you, didn't he?
He pretty much kicked me out. Yep.
He said, if you keep asking these questions about voting requirements, I'm going to throw you in jail, right?
Yeah, I didn't have my press ID on me, so he thought I was campaigning, I think.
So, like any good reporter, you wanted to figure out who that man was, right, ma'am?
Yes.
So, at a press conference, just after the election took place, you and one of your colleagues, you asked the mayor if he had ever met that man, right?
Another one of my colleagues did, yes.
The mayor, to be clear, she said no, right?
That's right.
She said she had never seen the person in that photo in her entire life, right?
That's what I heard.
But ma'am, you know that was a lie, don't you?
It's true. I went down to the police department and had a pal of mine give me a criminal record.
You'd
Okay,
recognize
fine.
that criminal record if I showed it to you?
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to approach Mr. Zhu and the witness in turn with what's pre-marked as plaintiff 7.
Sure.
Your Honor, would you like that?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Ms. Sandberg, that's that criminal record that you were given by the police department, right?
Looks like it, yep.
And on the first page there, that's an official certification of this as a public record in the city of Truman, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't look like it's been changed or altered in any way.
No.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff offers Exhibit 7.
We'd object, Your Honor. Under 403, more prejudicial than probative, may I be heard?
Sure.
A long list of the criminal record of this man, Casey French, isn't probative. First of all, a lot of those things that he's been accused of, they aren't probative in today's case at all. And secondly, the ones that are probative, the charges where Mayor Heisman represented him, he was found not guilty. Certainly this criminal record will inflame the passions of the jury and is more prejudicial than probative. If opposing counsel is trying to use this to establish the relationship between Mayor Heisman and Casey French, we'd be happy to stipulate that Mayor Heisman represented him, but at this point there's no probative value.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah.
We aren't just offering this to show a relationship between the defendant and Mr. French, although that is part of the reason we're offering this document. Specifically, Your Honor, we're offering this criminal record to show that the defendant had knowledge that Mr. French was capable of committing fraud, that he had a history of impersonating police officers, and it makes it more likely than not that the defendant would have sought him out when the defendant decided to commit election fraud to steal the votes in this election.
Your Honor.
Did the mayor already testify as to the charges she represented this guy on?
Your Honor, I don't believe the mayor ever told us that this man was accused of fraud each of those times, and Your Honor, we certainly didn't hear that this man was convicted of impersonating a police officer.
Your Honor.
And you're not going to, the jury will disregard that third sidebar with what you said. Go ahead.
Your Honor, certainly then it is more prejudicial than probative if they're trying to use this evidence to suggest that the mayor would have gone to this man to commit fraud because he was found not guilty. The man was found not guilty of fraud. Certainly the jury can't see that because
You can make that argument when you get to that point, but I'm going to let counsel run through the 3 dates and the 3 charges involving the mayor's representation of this person, but the rest of the record is not admissible.
Certainly, Your Honor. Let's take those one by one, Ms. Sandberg. You found that this man, the man that the mayor denied knowing, was represented by Mayor Heisman in 2001, right?
That's right.
Specifically, he was represented by the mayor when he was accused of fraud, right?
Yes.
Impersonating public officials.
Yes, that's what it says here.
The very next year, he was represented once again by the mayor, right?
That's right.
And once again, he was accused of fraud, right?
Yes, sir.
Of impersonating a police officer.
Looks like it, yep.
2 years later, ma'am, in 2004, he was represented once again by Mayor Heisman, right?
Yes.
And this time, he was accused of fraud and impersonating a police officer.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, if someone wanted to commit fraud, would they be more or less able to do that if they knew a person who was able to do those things?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained without argument.
Withdrawn, Your Honor. Ms. Sandberg, you'll agree with me that when the mayor stood in front of that room of press reporters and talked to the citizens of Truman, she denied ever having met Casey French in the first place.
That's true.
But what your reporting revealed, or what your evidence found, was that she did know that man, right?
That's what this is. Yep.
That she'd represented him 3 different times.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Sandberg. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel.
Just one brief redirect question. Ms. Sandberg, counsel asked you a minute ago about how people in line were talking about voting requirements. You see any of those people actually leave the line?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Sandberg. Nothing further.
No recross, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Thank you.
Mr. Pruitt, you're going to deconstruct?
Yes.
Thank you. At this time, Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Chase Michael to the stand.
All right.
Permission to set up the easel one more time for use of a different demonstrative.
Has it been clear to the counsel?
Okay, counsel, clear the easel as well.
Yes, Your Honor, we have seen this demonstrative before.
That's okay. Okay, sir, you swear testimony about to give us the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat, and you're comfortable, please state your full name and spell your last name. Thank you. Excuse me.
Should I wait?
No, you can tell the
You
jury.
can go ahead, Mr. Michael.
Hi, I'm Chase Michael, Michael.
And Your Honor, I just asked permission to reposition myself when opposing counsel uses the demonstrative.
You guys don't have to ask any of that, it's okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
What's your profession, Mr. Michael?
I'm a political polling consultant, and I also teach undergrad statistics at Cal Poly Pomona out in California.
What do you mean you're a political polling consultant?
I own my own firm, N5 Political Research. We're based out in Costa Mesa, California, just south of LA. And we conduct surveys across the entire country on federal elections, state elections, occasionally even important city elections as well.
What's your experience doing that?
Oh, quite a bit. I've been doing it ever since I finished my master's at UC San Diego. So now it's got to be about 12 years at this point.
And what's your education like in that area specifically?
I got my bachelor's in political science and my master's in social and demographic analysis. So it's mostly political polling.
How many polls have you administered?
Quite a few. I've worked on hundreds of elections at this point, so thousands of polls.
When you administer polls, sir, do you have reliable methods and principles?
I do. We don't publish a poll that isn't based on standard methods.
Do you have sufficient facts?
Of course.
Are you confident in the conclusions that you reach?
Yes, we always meet a 95% statistical confidence level.
What can you do with polling information once you've already collected it?
Well, once we collect the data, we have to interpret it. If you just hand numbers over to a candidate, it's really not going to make much sense. So what we do is we look at the numbers and look for trends to try and figure out what the most likely story is associated with those numbers. We look for patterns and try and analyze those.
Are those pattern matching methods reliable?
Yes, I mean, it's what we do for all our work.
Do you have experience doing it?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Michael, how'd you get involved in this case?
My firm had been working on the Truman election since it started gearing up toward the end of 2014, and we conducted polls. When reports of fraud hit the news, Mayor Heisman's office asked me to take a look at the election results and see if there was any evidence there to support misinformation fraud, reducing Ms. Ginger's vote count in District 12, Bellevue.
Were you able to do that?
Yes, I was.
Were there big differences, sir, between the election results and the polls that you took?
For the most part, no. Our polls were quite consistent. We must have taken 10 or 11 over the course of the entire campaign, and in every single one, we found that Mayor Heisman would win re-election.
What could the polls tell you about the plaintiff, Ms. Ginger?
Ms. Ginger had very few polling advantages outside of District 12, her home neighborhood. That's where she had a lot of initial support since she grew up there. But across the rest of Truman, most voters preferred the mayor.
Did those strengths and weaknesses ever change for the two candidates?
For a while, no. Registration increased in District 12, quite a bit actually, which gave the appearance of Ms. Ginger catching up closer and closer to Mayor Heisman. But it sort of maxed out in February when registration flatlined. She didn't really have the necessary support at that point.
What do the numbers suggest happened then in the election?
Between our